Hey everybody, Charles here. All right, it is Monday, October 3rd, around 5 a.m. I am recording this and about to edit and upload our episode. Dan and I experienced Hurricane Ian. I just got my power back last night. Dan got his a couple days ago. All my equipment is at Dan's house, so I headed over here around 4:30 and let myself in to get this episode done. This week we interview Dr. Toni Muzzonigro, who is, or Dr. Muzzi, as we call her. She has been my doctor and currently is Dan's doctor. And we talked to her about a host of men's health issues. And I hope you enjoy the first half of this episode. The second half will be available for our subscribers at our Patreon, which you can get to by going to mindfullymasculine.com/Patreon. And just subscribe there for the bargain basement price of $1 a month. And you can get all of our exclusive episodes. We release one per week just for our patrons. All right, enjoy, and we'll see you again next week.
Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm great. I had a good weekend.
Yeah, what'd you get up to?
Bought myself a birthday present. Got a new
Nice.
Apple Watch.
Sweet.
My first foray into Apple Watches, and I'm pleasantly surprised. I was really struggling with the price point, figuring, hey, am I going to use it enough to justify spending this much money? Because then,
Sure.
you add all the extra accessories, right? The charging
Yeah.
station, which, by the way, doesn't come with the USB-C adapter, the plug-in.
Oh, yeah.
And even like the Belkin one that,
Yeah.
it's a little charging stand to make it like a little nightstand, doesn't come with that either. So that's fine. Found some smaller footprint ones on Amazon,
Yeah.
so I can pack that and bring that bring that with me. So I'm pretty excited about it. Got my workout app on here instead of pulling my phone in and out like a caveman at the gym in my pocket. I can now use my fancy new Apple Watch. So I'm pretty
Well,
happy about
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I made the switch from Fitbit a while ago, and I'm very pleased with my Apple Watch. The messaging and the notifications that you get from an Apple phone to an Apple Watch. There's no better.
It's smooth.
There's no better wearable phone integration than Apple phone, iPhone, and Apple Watch. They're great together.
Yeah. I was just telling you too. I love the fact I didn't realize you could actually control the music or whatever you're listening to from your watch that is running on your phone. So for Audible apps, for listening to books, and I went through. Speaking of which, we were talking about using doing the 4 agreements, and listening to that. And I don't know if you had a chance to or ever listen to the 5th agreement.
No, I've not listened to a single agreement yet.
Okay, so what I would suggest, they're not very long. It's great. It's a quick listen or quick read, whatever you're going to do. My suggestion is do the 4 and then get the 5th one. That's okay. I think the 4 are it's only 2 hours. The 5th one is 4 hours, but the 5th one really fills in a lot of blanks and questions that I had for the first 4.
Nice.
And it's a little bit more of a how to apply the first 4. And talks about an additional one that is important, but it's pretty great stuff. It really helped me kind of gain some perspective on a lot of things, and it's fantastic. I love it. So great suggestion from you. We're going to give Charles credit for this one because this is solid stuff. I can't wait to get into this one.
Yeah, I've not gotten around to reading or listening to 4 agreements yet, but I've had it recommended to me by multiple people who seem to have their lives fairly together. So I figured it'd be worth a listen. Is the 5th agreement by the same guy? It's a sequel that he wrote. Yeah,
it's actually him and his son.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll look forward to that. I went to a wedding up in North Carolina this weekend, up in Lake Lure, Chimney Rock area. And it was we drove up on Friday, drove back on Sunday, so that's a pretty grueling schedule. Stayed at a little lodge cabin place right on the river that had very short ceilings. So I think they were 6 foot tall ceilings. So I felt like Gandalf when he goes to visit Bilbo. The wedding was fun. Didn't do any dancing because it was a fairly small crowded dance floor, and it was mostly 90s and 2000s hip hop, which I don't have the dancing skills in my toolbox to really do much with that. So I kind of just stood I made up for the lack of dancing with overeating. So there you go.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, I guess swing is kind of tough to match maybe to 90s hip hop, I would think. Maybe not. I don't know.
I was listening to the music and I wasn't, it was not feeling like a possibility really. So.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, but it was a fun
so
wedding.
Did you overeat on anything? Did you overeat anything good?
They had it was a buffet with some chicken, some flank steak, some roasted vegetables, some really good potatoes, and then for dessert
healthy.
they had
what are you talking about?
They had little mini bundt cakes that were ridiculous. Ooh. I had like 5 of them. They were so good.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was fun. Saw some friends that we'd met at the engagement party that took place over in the Tampa area. I guess it was it would have been last summer, I guess. And so we were seated with them. So we got to talk with them and found out that they do an Oscar party every year that is like a black tie and gown Oscar party that they host. So I'm looking forward to,
at their house or
at their house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I like that.
I agree. I'm going to, I'm going to make it a priority to watch all of the Best Picture nominees this year. And so I know which one I think will win versus which one I hope will win. And, I kind of been thinking I needed a new tuxedo for New Year's this year anyway. No solid plans for what I'm going to do. New Year's Eve parties, they're a bit of it's a big expense normally because I like to go to fancy ones. But when you're paying for a fancy one that includes all your alcohol and your food and you are not drinking alcohol, it is kind of tough to justify because obviously the alcohol part of it, I'm sure costs the venue more than the food part of it. Especially, if it's decent booze. So it's hard to justify spending, $200, $300, $400 a person when you're not even taking advantage of the free alcohol.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I don't know.
I get it.
But I still want a new tuxedo, so I'll figure something out.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I went to brunch yesterday with the Wettermans, and
oh yeah,
it was at the Porch in Winter Park. That's a great spot for brunch. I mean, lively. They've got all the football games going, and it was a little bit different because I'm not drinking. It's my birthday, and it was a brunch, and so I think that's the first brunch I've been to where I didn't actually have any alcohol. So it was a new experience. It was a little tempting, but Kurt wasn't drinking either, and so that made it a little bit. And actually, Richard didn't drink either. So we had just gotten back from playing tennis, and it's probably been about 20 years.
Whoa, really?
Racket, and
nice.
And it showed. It showed. The cobwebs are absolutely there.
I was
frustrating them quite a bit. Yeah.
Who's the best brother of the two of them? Who's better at tennis?
Kurt. Yeah. Kurt is, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. He has a wicked serve.
Really?
He's good. And it's also a little bit different because he's left-handed. So, what is normally, when you're hitting to his backhand, he's hitting a crushing forehand normally, so I'm used to playing right-handed people.
Yeah.
And so it's a little different. It's a little different, but we had a great time. Went over to, the tennis courts over in Winter Park. And it encouraged me to kind of start taking some lessons or maybe just, just bring up my game a little bit because cardio wise, it was fantastic workout. I was a sweaty pig.
Well, I did find a place over in Holly Hill, which is a little town just north of Daytona Beach that does pickleball group classes. And I believe the very first one is free. I think the first one's either free or very close to free. So
send that to me. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's schedule after
I'm game.
After Hurricane Ian destroys civilization, such as it is, and all we have left is the ability to play pickleball. We'll have to schedule a lesson.
I'm in. Yeah.
All right, cool. I look forward to having a new hobby where I can research and purchase a bunch of gear, bunch of accessories.
You know what? You might be disappointed because you're not going to be able to spend that much. I was looking at pickleball sets, and they're fairly inexpensive, which is good. I mean, I like that. I mean, I think a set of 4, the intro set was like $60 with 4 paddles or something like that,
Yeah, but there's got to be a fancy version of it too. There's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, I was seeing some paddles for like $100, for the paddle by itself, one paddle, so wow. You can, if you really, if you're burning, money's burning a hole in your pocket, then you can, But
and what are the balls made out of? Are the balls just made out of plastic?
They look like big wiffle balls. Okay. So what's nice is, and the court's a little bit smaller, so it looks like it's a little less intense, but you still need, you still have some skill. It still can move quite a bit. At least from a couple of YouTube videos that I was watching, it looks like a lot of fun. It really does. And it looks like you can play for a while without getting completely winded, which is what happened to me over the weekend.
Yeah, that's absolutely a big concern for me. I want to be able to play through a full game without having a massive coronary.
Yeah, but you don't have to worry about it. I mean, you walk a lot, you do a lot of cardio. You're in good shape. I've been slacking on my cardio, so I think you'd be fine.
We'll see. All right, cool. So let's wrap up our intro for now, and then we'll just start recording again when our guest is here.
Sounds good. All right, sir.
Cool.
All right.
Okay, so I guess I will jump in with the first question, if that's okay. Dr. Muzzi, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the medical field, and have you always been a direct primary care doctor, or is that a model that you switched to at some point in your career?
Yeah, so I've been a family doc out in practice for about 12 years now, and I've been doing direct primary care actually for the past 7, since 2015 when I moved to Florida. And but in my practice that I own, Optum Direct Care, has been for the past 3 years.
Okay.
And so I was in the grind, in the system, for years. Not very many, but enough to make me think like there had to be a better way to go about delivering primary care. And so I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity when I moved to Florida.
Yeah, I really love the direct primary care model. I still have a direct primary care doctor. It's not you anymore because I moved out into the boonies in the middle of nowhere. So now I've got somebody a little bit closer to me. But yeah, it's actually the same kind of model that I use with my technology clients, where the idea of, listen, you pay me a fixed amount of money every month.
Right.
And so I'm incentivized to keep your computers as healthy as possible. So you contact me as little as possible, but they're incentivized to call me as often as they have a problem so that I can get it dealt with as quickly as possible. So neither of us have a difficult situation that just develops and gets worse and worse over longer and longer periods of time. And so I love the model. It's great because my idea is I'm going to pay my doctor this amount of money every month, whether I use them or not. So if something comes up, I'm incentivized to go ahead and take care of it as soon as possible, rather than just let it stew and get worse.
Absolutely. Much easier to put out a smolder than a house fire.
Exactly. And Dan, you've been direct primary. Is Dr. Muzzi your first direct primary care doctor? Did you do it before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nope. No, she's my first. Yep.
And what's your experience been like?
It's been miserable. I do not recommend it at all.
How dare you?
It's been great. And for me, it was more about being listened to and having more time with the doctor. I've been, being a type 1 diabetic, I've been seeing doctors regularly, sometimes every 3 months since I was about 7 years old. So, a lot of them I noticed, when I was a kid, I spent some good time with my pediatric endocrinologist, and, he would bring me into the office and we'd have a conversation about what was going on. And it was really about educating me on how to take care of myself as a diabetic. And I guess I got kind of spoiled by that, because then when I started to go to other doctors as I got a little bit older, it was more of a kind of a churn, get in and out kind of thing. And there wasn't much conversation happening. There really wasn't any kind of listening to my experience and my opinions about myself and my health. And a lot of it was based purely on blood work. And, I found that be the case before I went to Dr. Muzzi down here. And then I remember, like the first appointment, it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours with Dr. Muzzi. And she listened, and she asked about, what my experience was. And moving forward, I've stayed with her because she also bases a lot of her advice on how I'm feeling, and not purely based on the numbers of, of blood work. And also I feel like, there's, she actually remembers things, with so many, with I think a lot less patients, in that model, she can remember a little bit more than the average doctor. And the other doctors that I've been to, didn't remember a thing, and they just looked at a chart. And really, I mean, I might as well have been just like a product on the shelf. That's how I felt. And it's completely different. So with at least with, my experience with Dr. Muzzi.
Yeah, and I'll say that while I'm pleased with my current doctor, I've never had an appointment like my first appointment with Dr. Muzzi, as far as just how long it went and with how much. I mean, she asked me all the questions I didn't know I was going to be asked, but yeah, I really appreciated how much time. It was like being in a room with a doctor for like an hour and a half is like being in a room with a movie star for an hour and a half. You're just not used to that happening.
Right. Yeah.
But that's such a shame,
I know.
Time is the special sauce when it comes to, taking care of people, making the connection, establishing the trust. And time is what all of my colleagues who are out there working in the regular offices, they just simply don't have, and so they're handicapped by time limitations.
I am a little curious. What are some general demographics of your patients? Is it mostly older people, younger people, men, women? How does that break down for your practice?
So I've got a bit of a bell curve. We have, probably because of the style of the practice, we attract a lot of professionals in, say, they're like mostly like late 30s, 40s, 50s, early 60s.
Okay.
And we see whole families. So I've got probably a little less than a quarter of my patients are actually children. And a much smaller percentage are over 65. And so it's a lot of these folks who are busy. Some have insurance and choose to also do direct primary care. Like that's what Dan does. And then others either can't afford insurance or just can't bring themselves to spend as much as insurance costs right now and don't qualify for subsidies. And so, they use us as a kind of gateway and to access the discounted rates for labs and imaging and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's where Dan and I are. He's on the one end where he has insurance, and when I look at how relatively healthy I still am and how expensive insurance, I just can't. I can't justify it.
It is really, really difficult. Yeah, and it's like whether you have it or don't have it, the principle of it right now is very difficult to get past.
Right,
and I get that. So.
And I know plenty of people that do have insurance, but their monthly their copay for a single office visit is the same amount of money they'd be spending with a direct primary care doctor anyway. So why do that? Why not do both like Dan's doing both? Right.
Yeah. And, a big barrier to entry to direct primary care is simply that people have not heard of it still.
Yes, absolutely.
It's becoming more well recognized, and a lot of these practices are kind of sprouting up throughout the country. So this is a big, exciting movement that's been happening over several years. But by and large, it's still like people like to think about insurance first and who's going to take my insurance, and then their care kind of goes in that direction based on that, which is how we've all kind of been programmed. But yeah, being able being able to educate people. And so the more I grow, and we're going to be adding a physician pretty soon. And,
congratulations.
And, and right now there's a practice that's opening up like literally less than 5 minutes from where I live by a friend of mine. And I'm so excited because it is not a competitive field whatsoever. It is, there is encouragement and camaraderie and like freely sharing of information, because everybody who's doing this loves it so much and is so passionate about it that it's the only way to go for primary care, that we just help each other. And it's, it's super cool, as a business model where you see another practice open up and you're like, yes, because that means that many more people are going to know what DPC is.
Right.
And that's exciting.
Yeah. Dan and I are lucky to be in a similar position with podcasting, because most of the new listeners that we get to our podcast are people who listen to other podcasts, where it's so much more work to get somebody who's never listened to a podcast before to decide to listen to your podcast for the first time. Yeah, it's so much harder. So yeah, I think anything we can do to get the message of direct primary care out there, I think is a good thing. And we're going to have our buddy Richard, who he's a little bit of a research nerd like Dan and I are, where before he went with a direct primary care doctor, he did all the legwork to figure it out and figure out what choices he should make and what the pros and cons were. And so we're going to do an episode with him as a consumer that really went crazy to figure out, is this the best decision for me? And he did all that research and came up to the conclusion, yes, it is. So we're looking forward to having him on the next week or two. That's
great. And the thing is, if it's not for you, fine, you move on. There's not a whole lot lost in trying it out.
Right.
Because I think even by law, DPC practices aren't able to even like bill for a whole year or whatever, some concierge practices, they got you for a year. And something about the model of DPC, I actually don't think that's allowed. So there's usually a little bit of a registration fee, and then you have your monthly fee. But
that's a great question, Dr. Muzzi. What's the difference between DPC and concierge medicine? That might be something to help.
Yeah. So, and I can see for the layperson who hasn't really had a lot of experience with both, they can come off rather similarly. One of the biggest differences is that in the concierge model, that doctor is actually still beholden to insurance companies, and they will charge a fee that's typically at least double what a DPC practice would charge monthly, but then they also bill for each office visit. And which, that's fine. But they're still sort of like in the game, and they're keeping primary care in the insurance game, which is kind of an exhausting proposition. Whereas DPC is like blue collar concierge, they kind of call it. It's more affordable. We are, when you call our office, we hope it seems just as concierge as a concierge practice, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to do what is right medically in the most efficient way possible, cutting out the nonsense that sort of muddies up the waters in most primary care offices. So we don't have a guy that's like hunting down the, billing for 6 months, and we don't have to do much in the way of, prior authorizations and all these different things, because, even we can choose better in a DPC practice, even if somebody does have insurance. If insurance is causing a problem and is actually becoming more of a barrier to their care, we can say like, well, hey, guess what? If you go here, you can still do this study, even though your insurance didn't think it was necessary for whatever reason. We can still do it. Whereas in the standard practice, especially if you're hospital owned, it just doesn't happen. Like your care stops if the insurance company says it's not allowed. There aren't carved out pathways for like what to do next. And from like a capitalism standpoint, direct primary care is, the whole movement is really proud of the fact that we really truly drive the cost of healthcare down. And, because if you don't have to worry about, cranking 25 people into your office in order to just be able to bill the insurance company, to receive whatever you receive, not very much. That's just an extra burden, right? insuring primary care is entirely unnecessary because it's something you're going to need.
Right.
I think insurance should be more for the unforeseen, the larger expenses, the things you didn't ever foresee that you were going to need. And so, to have to like bill an insurance company to see somebody for a cold or what, and that's why doctors make you go in the regular model. They need you to go in because otherwise their time isn't valued in any way.
Right.
And so it's just inefficient and clunky.
And Dr. Muzzi, typically, you don't have to get in numbers if you don't want to, but I'm just wondering how many patients do you see versus or have maxed out at versus what you've seen in, the traditional model in terms of the number of patients a doctor may have?
Yeah. So typically in the standard fee-for-service practice model, physicians have to see about 4 or 5 patients an hour.
Whoa.
And so doing that math, and you might get like, for a full physical, you might see more like two people in an hour, but for like regular visits, it's somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes per visit. And so a typical physician's panel, once they're considered full in the standard practice, is about 4,000 patients.
Wow.
And and so in direct primary care, most of us, and it depends on what you're going for. I think, my style and how much time I want and I feel like I need might be a little bit lower on average. Most direct primary care doctors cap their patient panel off around 600 or 700. And in a day on average, like, in the fee for service world, you might see 25 patients, whereas in direct primary care, a busy day might, with a full panel, you might see like 7, 8, 9, something like that patients. And, we do a lot more by phone, by text, and those, and so there's probably a little bit more of that. There's definitely more of that. Just because we're able to, and it's more efficient and it's easier for patients. It's easier for us, knock the rash visit out with a quick photo and you can identify it, treat it, boom, done. Nobody had to leave work. Nobody had to wait in your waiting room for hours or.
Yeah. I love that, I love that accessibility because it's also, think about the patient, it's their time is money as well. So if you don't have to make an appointment, you don't have to spend your time then being away from whatever you do to generate money or to live your life. So what is that cost worth? So, in terms of people to having insurance and wanting to use the insurance and doctors for that versus, paying a little bit extra for the direct primary care on top of the insurance, which is what I'm doing. My time is so much more valuable to be able to get those shortcuts for, little things here and there. And for me, it's more about a better level of care. Cause I feel like it's a little bit more proactive than the traditional model for sure. But yeah, how much is that time worth? And I guarantee you, for the nominal fees that most direct primary care doctors charge, it's more than worth it.
Right. And that's the other thing that makes direct primary care appealing to small businesses is that, they can kind of like give them this benefit of having this kind of care, but also they can be assured that their employees are going to have less need to miss work for illness, either because they didn't have to go in actually, and they could handle things quickly over the phone, or because things could be identified earlier. And there are a lot of statistics actually surrounding that I don't know very well, but the savings for actual employers in like, employees miss time from work and illness and such. So,
that's amazing to me. It's, you're seeing about a fifth of the patients or a sixth of the same amount of patients, than in the traditional insurance model, and their hands are a little bit more tied than yours in terms of looking at, alternative treatments and, supplementation and things like that. It's not just straight, I'm going to write a script for this. And
right. And certainly like not having to answer to hospital administrators who aren't clinical, who are trying to tell you that you're not doing a good enough job because you're not seeing enough patients and you're not, fulfilling their bottom line. Or, they have other metrics that are set by insurance companies. So the hospital administrators are given a list of several different metrics. They like to call them quality metrics, but I don't consider them that. I'd have an example from when I was working for a large hospital system in Philadelphia, that I went for my quarterly review and, turned out I hadn't prescribed enough statin drugs to satisfy their threshold for me to have provided a sufficient quality of care to my patients, that they actually withheld some monetary bonus. I forget what it was, that I just thought I was going to get. I'm like, yeah, I'm providing quality, like, and then when it came down, because if you educate a patient and you make suggestions about the standard of care, and then you discuss with them and they tell you, no, dude, I don't want to take that drug. It can end there and you can still be friends, and there doesn't need to be an adversarial relationship at that point. It's just like, this is their choice. And so that's kind of always how I behaved. But then when it came down to it, the hospital was not satisfied with that because it meant that they were reimbursed less from Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Right.
And that, you talk about like why physicians are burning out at an alarming rate. Well, you are caring and compassionate, and you're trying to connect with your patients and do all these things that you sacrificed a whole decade to be able to do. And then you got some suit telling you you're not providing quality care because you didn't prescribe this drug, or didn't, not enough people bought into the need for X, Y, or Z screening, procedure. And all you could do is suggest these things, educate people, and discuss them, but they're allowed to say no. People are allowed to say no to anything, and so being in a direct primary care setting where you have that autonomy and you don't have to have a breakdown in your relationship with the patient because you're going to like financially be punished for it, it's just liberating.
Yeah, I think a very rigid philosophy of, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. That might work if you're fixing computers or pickup trucks, but it doesn't really work when you're trying to fix people.
Yeah, I get it. I get wanting to have metrics, It's just that there are so many nuances and things that you really can't take into account when you're creating those bottom lines for humans and biology and physiology, Anyway.
Okay, I've got a personal question for you. I remember reading once that most people who go into medicine usually have some sort of childhood experience that sort of predisposes them for having an interest in that. Is there anything like that on your side? Did you want to be a doctor since you were a little kid?
Yes. Yeah. And absolutely. Yeah. So for me, it was something I knew from the time I was at least like 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
And yeah, what really, really sparked my passion was my father. So he is this sturdy, self-assured, big Italian guy. Like you, Mr. Charles.
I'm not that big.
Anyway, he was always my rock. I looked up to him, still do. He has type 1 diabetes. Or I can say had type 1 diabetes, because he actually had a kidney and pancreas transplant in 2003, which essentially cured his diabetes, his type 1 diabetes, due to the anti-rejection drugs, which involve a lot of steroids. He then developed type 2 diabetes, which is a different animal, we all know. But the point of the matter is he's alive. He's had many experiences. He has 12 grandkids and a great grandchild that have been born in that interval. But anyway, as a kid, it really, really struck me at a deep level, having to see this big, tough, strong guy who had all the answers, everything, sometimes be vulnerable, and it was before now we kind of have a better idea of how to manage blood sugars. We understand that like carbohydrates are carbohydrates, or at least some of us do. Right? Dan can tell you. Dan, by the way, should have an honorary degree in endocrinology because his command for the physiology surrounding blood sugar management is unparalleled. I've never seen anything like it before. He is the most impressive type 1 diabetic I have ever known. And will ever. But anyway, so my father back in the day, Dan.
Thank you. Oh, wow.
He's an impressive guy.
So I need to bring you on I need to bring you on a podcast in order to get these compliments, because I don't get this in the office.
You hush. Anyway, so but back then the insulin that they use would cause blood sugar fluctuations, highs, lows, and I remember like packing rolls of Lifesavers when we would go on vacations as a kid, because I was so worried that, my father's sugar was going to go low, and it's scary. Like, this is a scary thing to witness.
You packed it for him, or you carried it on yourself.
I'm like this kid, right? Like
that's
an
very
8-9-year-old kid getting ready to go on our trip. And I'm like, so for sure. And, and just by the nature of his personality and how he is, like he's just been an integral part of every important, important activity in my life since then. But certainly it's like you are, in a position to see your hero, vulnerable. It really makes you feel something at a deep level. And then it gives you that drive, because I'll tell you, giving up a whole decade to study, an undergrad and med school and residency, like it's a thing, it's a big thing to do. And you really have to have, I think, something like that in order to feel great about it, to feel like I'm doing this for a reason. And,
that's something Dan and I talk about frequently when it comes to habit building. If your why is strong enough, you can get anything done. And
that's absolutely right.
Yeah. If you don't have that strong why, then it's hard to develop a new habit and get yourself out of bed early or to the gym or whatever, unless you really got that thing saying, pushing you forward. And it sounds like your experience with your dad absolutely pushed you right into the field that you're in, which is great.
Yeah, for sure.
And just out of curiosity, Dr. Muzzi, with some of the patients that, you want to recommend making some changes for their health, what's your approach with them? I mean, you definitely have the benefit of having more time for some longer appointments with them, with the traditional doctors. That I've been to, when they need me to make it or want me to make a change, it was just like like reading something off like a grocery list. All right, just get this done. And it's just, you're asking me to make a significant change, and all you're doing is barking an order at me. That's not going to be very effective. What kind of strategies do you usually use when you need to, make some changes with patients? I mean, I know you do. I saw that, you did some sort of presentations, and you're breaking down, trying to help educate patients in terms of, metabolism. And I saw some of the pretty drawings you had on the board there for, the human body and different, the liver and things like that. So I was just curious if you could share any of your strategies in terms of how you help patients make changes.
It's just, it's so different depending on the patient and who you're talking to, right? And what their come from is, where they're trying to go. We have that luxury, as you said, of time. And so, and a lot of the guys that I see are very wellness motivated. And so once they have an understanding of, and so I get like nerdy and scientific with a lot of them. And because men in particular, and women as well, but men more so, are more pragmatic. And once they have an understanding and they understand like X, Y, or Z to get there, they're much more likely to follow through on it than the top down approach. But like, if you go bottom up and, and explain to people like why, okay, like, let's back up a step, and now let's go forward. And now let's see what's going to happen if you take this path versus this path. And I'm not, women as well. Women are, as you guys know, more overtly emotional, and men generally, on an outward basis, seem more pragmatic, although we know the emotional piece is something probably society is suppressing to an extent, as you guys have talked about at length. But
it's still there. Like, it's just not necessarily always acceptable to express it in the same way. Yeah.
Exactly. But anyhow, yeah. So just getting down to that level, when I explain to my guys, because I think I am lucky in that, I have this repetition and lengthy visits with people that we kind of like deconstruct over time, and people's defenses kind of come down, and ultimately, like, I think things come out in our visits that probably wouldn't have the ability to otherwise. But I'll be seeing like a super stoic dude who's just like a charge on, and I'm like, are you all right? And ultimately it's like, no, dude, I'm dying. Like I'm working all day. I'm not seeing my family. Not eating well. I feel stressed all the time. And, I think a lot of guys do that. They hard charge and they don't focus on themselves. And because I think society just kind of says, like, suck it up. You're supposed to be a man, right? Like, do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And don't slow down, and don't take a look within, but explaining to guys like what physiologically is happening when stress is not kept in check. And when the that part of your nervous system is overactive perpetually, how like every cell in your body can't do what it needs to do for digestion, for detoxification, for cellular regeneration and nutrient absorption, and all those good things that happen when we are not in fight or flight mode. So anyway, yeah. So once you can have those discussions, people's and then figuring out like what is your motivation, right? Like, you want to be around for your kid's graduation. Are you having a grandkid in the next 5 years? So it's trying to and sometimes it's like you want to look, awesome and be a hot stud. Sometimes that's the motivation, but yeah. So it's just so very variable, depending on the person.
Okay. That is part 1 of our interview with Dr. Muzzi. If you'd like to hear part 2, head over to our Patreon at mindfullymasculine.com/Patreon. It's going to release on Thursday. That will be October 6th. And if you'd like more information about Dr. Muzzi and her practice, head to OptimumDirectCare.com. And again, our Patreon is on sale right now for $1 a month, and that gives you a bonus episode every week. That will only be available for our first 50 subscribers, and then the price is going to go up. So hope to see you over there, and we'll talk again next week.